Hey, Jen.
Hi. That good?
Yeah, that's good.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I like your mug.
Thank you. Neville got it free from work.
Everyone likes free mugs. You'll have a ponytail soon, Mike.
Trying to grow it, definitely. Been eating
You look
binging
like a wee pirate.
Arr. Thank you. How's your snuggly top today?
You're so snuggly. So snuggly.
Oh. What have you both been up to?
I've been watching Buffy.
Yes, that's good. What season are you on?
4.
Oh, what stage still are at in season?
Buffy's at college.
Okay.
Getting involved with the Institute guys.
Okay. Have we had the military? Was that an early? That's the early one, isn't it? I think.
No, they're sort of military-esque.
Okay.
Hey, Kitty. Hey, Rory.
Hello.
Hey.
How's it going?
My uterus doesn't like me today.
Oh no.
Oh.
Are we talking like cramps or rough?
Lots of tea. Lots of cuddles.
Yeah.
Chocolate. Good excuse for chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my
Apple
best,
crumble though.
yeah,
Lots of hair stroking.
my best investment was like a meter long hot water bottle so that it can be on your front and your back at the same time.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That sounds incredible.
it's great.
Have you got it handy?
Yeah. It's tied up at the moment. It has like a bit of string. So it's maybe not quite a meter. But it's still long enough to go around my tummy.
Longer than the average one.
God.
Like, honestly, brilliant investment. But yeah, if you get it in your tummy and your back at the same time, then it's highly recommended.
I once had a really bad time at work, and like there were about 7 people on my floor who were all like, "Oh, I have a hot water bottle in my locker. Please have it."
Did you strap them like all around you in a kind of like vest?
No, I just took one and did it lying down.
Oh, okay.
And ate chocolate and listened to Terry Pratchett for an hour until I stopped crying.
Oh. Hey, Belle.
You brought all the teddies.
Yeah, this is just my living room, I'm afraid. I'd love to say this was a special effort, but they just hang out here.
Oh.
I should get my teddy.
I haven't had a bell recently. Yeah, I got bell twice in one day.
Yay! I got Jen twice in one day.
Yay!
Woo! This is a very good day.
Because yeah, Jen, I haven't spoken to you for ages. What's new? What's going on?
You have a cat?
I have a pussycat, yeah. We got her in February. So
that's cute.
she's currently sleeping in a box, which is right next to the nice little bed that we got for her.
Yeah, that sounds cute.
Yep. My understanding is that cats like to sleep next to the very expensive things that you bought for them.
Yeah.
In the things you didn't want them to sit in.
Or to add real insult to injury, the box that the fancy thing came in.
Oh.
But to be fair, like,
Brutal.
box is like a perfect size for her. It just fits her. So
I like it with cats with boxes that are too small for them. They're desperately trying to get inside them.
yeah, she does that too. But that's like been my most exciting thing, really.
Oh, Teddy's on show. Yeah.
Oh, Teddy's on show. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
What does it say?
It says fuck the Tories.
Belle made it for us.
Oh.
That is awesome.
I do genuinely take this little dude to bed.
Oh.
There's a photo somewhere of me getting my one of my chest pieces, and
I
holding
saw
on.
that.
Yeah.
I believe you were having your actual nipple tattooed at the time.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes, I was. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Beyond anything.
Oh. 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 Yeah, just you hold the nipples on.
Party hard.
Oh, that's given me a right funny feeling, that has. Oh my god, Malcolm, are you playing to us? Or are you playing to yourself? Oh. Oh, I'm enjoying the music and spirit. What else have we got? Andrada. Hi, Belle. Hi, Belle. Hello. Hello. Hi, Gordon. Hi, everybody. Ah.
I feel
Hey,
regret Malcolm's muted.
I know. Malcolm, may we not hear you?
No.
Hi,
He's actually just doing Wonderwall. It's fine.
I was just gonna say it's a John Cage cover.
What's everyone been up to today then?
Oh, I'm looking at you. You weren't here.
I went to work and cleaned touch points.
Ugh.
And I mean, it's important work.
It is
And
important.
Yeah. And came home and made lemon pasta, which was fucking delicious.
Yeah. I've had your lemon pasta and I can confirm that it is. Wow.
It is man good. Yeah. I started work on a baby's raffle today. That was nice.
Who's the, I mean, for any baby in particular or just
yes,
as a...
for my friend Emma, who I've
Is
known
a
for like
baby?
a decade now. Yeah, the baby is here, so it's kind of a time-sensitive thing. I'm trying to rush it out before, they actually start teething or anything.
That's really cool. Well, when it's done, can we see it?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, it's only marginally more child-safe than the actual knife I'm using, so nothing really to show yet, but...
Splinters.
Gotta learn.
I read a book today, and if anyone hasn't seen the post on Facebook, everyone should buy it and read it because it's goddamn amazing.
What's it called?
Give us a Frankie 1-paragraph review.
Okay, hold on. Right. It's called This Is How You Lose the Time War. It's amazing. Do you want to hear the blurb?
Yeah.
Yeah. Among the ashes of a dying world, an agent of the Commandant finds a letter. It reads, "Burn before reading."
Oh no!
Oh, we've lost Frankie.
We lost
We
you.
lost you.
The time was just
The last thing we heard was burn before reading.
And
Burn
then
before reading.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. I don't know what happened there.
Temporal
Gordon.
paradox.
Red and Blue, two rival agents hell-bent on securing the best possible future for their warring factions, strike up an unlikely correspondence. But what started as a taunt, a battlefield boast, grows into something more, something epic and romantic, something that could change the past and the future. The discovery of their bond will mean their deaths. There's still a war going on, and someone has to win that war. That's how wars work, right? It's amazing. I chowed through the whole thing this afternoon while on a video call to Zach and spent most of it crying.
I can confirm that.
Yes, hi Zach, hi babe. Yes, I'm evangelizing.
So that means you probably shouldn't read it to us because we're gonna cry the whole time.
I had genuinely considered doing this, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like it's quite I don't know if it would necessarily work as a Storytime book, as a kind of book by installments. I think it's probably something that you just have to get and read and let the language kind of wash over you.
I read it in installments over a few days, and it would probably take, 5 sessions to read for Storytime? You could do it in a week.
Do you think I should do it?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to cry. Storytime is my happy place.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Speaking of which, what time is it?
I don't know.
1
9
minute.
minutes past.
Story time? 1 minute.
9 minutes past.
I think I'm going to start Storytime 1 whole minute early tonight because we have a hefty chapter tonight. So the book divides pretty seamlessly into chunks of like 22 pages, but not this one. This is a big chunk. I could finish it earlier than intended, but that would miss the big dramatic climax. So unless anybody feels strongly that they would like to only have the usual amount of time tonight and that I will make one of the others a long one.
Give us the climax.
How long can we expect?
So the usual, the last couple of things have been about 22, 24 pages long. This one is, about 28, 29 pages. So it's not insanely long, but it is it will go on a little bit longer. There are a few different chapters, but the first few are quite short. It's also quite drama. So get your bears, okay? Brace yourselves. Now. Oh my God. Right. So if you remember, we'd stopped in the middle of a North chapter. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. After the music had stopped, after the performers had taken their final bows, after the crowd had applauded until a big top's canvas started to droop, and, more importantly, after her bear was lost in sleep, North climbed across the coracles to the mess boat. It was late, but the crew would congregate there to eat and drink the night away. The canvas was bright with lamps, and she could hear the laughter from 3 boats away. She pulled back the edge of the canvas and climbed inside. The Excalibur had been allowed to dock overnight on the island, which meant that the landlockers had enjoyed the show. No one would be reporting anything to the military. Red Gold had been right. When it came to judging the wants of crowds, he was right more often than he was wrong, although the consequences of wrongness were much more serious. North did not like to gamble. "North, child!" boomed Red Gold as North refastened the canvas over her head. He was still in his stage makeup and paper shirt, holding court at the head of the long metal table with his wife perched on his lap. Her smile was brittle. "Good evening, Jarrow," said North. The mess boat was 5 times the size of North's coracle, but it was packed with the entire circus crew. A warm glow filled the boat. Though the seal-fat lamps stank in the small space, they lit up as bright as sunshine. That old superstition about fire on a boat only had to be observed on the wood-hulled Excalibur. There were no windows in the metal-shelled coracles, and the need to see was more important than superstition. As long as the flames didn't reach as high as the canvas, they were safe, because almost everything in the coracles was made of metal or bone. Spotting Melia and Whitby in the corner, North made her way over to them, but was stopped by Red Gold's hand on her wrist. "Sit by us, my little sterling-to-be." He pulled her onto the pitted bench beside him, where a tin cup and plate were screwed onto the table. If she didn't drink, Red Gold would want to know why. And she was going to tell him, she really was, but not in front of the entire crew, and definitely not in front of Avalon. North unscrewed the cup and lifted it to be filled. Barrow, the fire breather, who also manned the gramophone and was also the cook, also the barman, filled her cup with a clear liquid. Its smell burned the inside of North's nose. "Thank you, Barrow." She tipped the cup so that the liquid touched her closed lips. No one would notice whether the level went down or not. "I saw your act this evening, North." Avalon's tone was prim, clipped, but she managed to fake a kindly expression in case Red Gold was watching. North bought some time by standing up from the bench and blowing Avalon an elaborate air kiss, then curtsying like she did after a Maypole performance. She took her seat again with a wink to Red Gold. It was cheeky, but he was drunk enough to love it. He cheered and applauded, his meaty arms squashing his wife each time he clapped. North hoped that this would count as a response, but Avalon wasn't letting go that easily. "Your act seemed a little different to last time," she said. "I don't recall your bear roaring before. It all seemed less controlled, louder, wilder." "That's how we like it, hey? Got to give the islanders a good show if we don't want empty bellies." Red Gold raised his cup to the canvas ceiling. "Cheers, cheers, cheers. That's 3 cheerses, so we all must drink." He drained his cup, and then, with a tenderness only seen in the very drunk, he rested his free hand on Avalon's belly. "Except for you, my flower bride. You cannot drink, so we drink to you. To Avalon, to my darling baby." There was a wordless roar as the rest of the circus crew raised their cups to toast the baby. North knew that most of them had gossiped and sniped that the baby was not Red Gold's, that Avalon lay with her horses, that she wasn't even really pregnant, that she wasn't even really a woman, that she was just a parcel of devils wrapped in skin. But Red Gold told them to drink, so they drank. "To the baby," whispered North. She wrapped her hands around her cup so that she wouldn't press them to her belly. When people are cruel, it's often said that they have no heart, only a cold space or lump of ice in their chest. This was never true of Avalon. She had no heart, everyone knew, but there was nothing cold about her. In her chest burned an enormous coal, white hot, brighter than the North Star. North knew the truth about Avalon. She was made of fire, and she would burn them all. Red Gold tipped Avalon back over his knee, smothering her with kisses. She struggled out of his grasp and slid onto the bench beside him, her chin raised, proud as a cat. She was probably trying to look noble, but the effect was spoiled by the gold glitter smeared across her cheek. North took her chance to slip away and creep over to Melia and Whitby. When they weren't slick-haired and wrapped in ribbons for the Maypole, it was easy to tell which was which. They had matching turquoise hair, but Melia's sat in neat pin curls, while Whitby's was a mass of braids and dreadlocks. North took 2 steps toward them and stopped. Ensel had enfolded himself from the bench and was standing in front of her, blocking her way. He was dressed all in black, and his lips were stained red. "Hello, Ensel," she said. He took hold of North's shoulders. Surprised, she jerked her hands up, ready to hit him, and he pecked a kiss on her lips. "I look forward to our wedding, North," he recited. All in one motion, he let go of North, sat back down, and drained his cup. The whole thing took less than a breath. After a few half-hearted whoops and table slaps, the crew returned to their conversations. North was glad that she hadn't hit Ensel. They'd kissed plenty as children, lips too wet, eyes and mouths shut tight. Since Red Gold had decided that they were to be married, they'd been alone together just a handful of times, and most of them were spent discussing how to get out of the marriage. As children, they'd pretended to be pirates and octopuses and priests, stolen the skin diving helmets to explore the night dark sea, crept to the black shore to share a stolen plum, its flesh softened to the colour of meat. She didn't know what had gone wrong between them. Perhaps nothing had. Perhaps she'd never liked him. The close quarters of the Excalibur could make it seem that two people were close, when really they didn't have a choice. As he'd kissed North, Ensel had been looking over to her shoulder to the head of the table, where Red Gold and Avalon sat. Was this some test that he had to pass? A challenge, an agreement, proof of his intentions for North? She felt as cold and functional as the metal bench. She took a seat beside Melia. "That damn family," she muttered. "Your damn family, you mean?" replied Whitby, his eyes only slightly unfocused. "You'll be one of them soon enough. Not long now until the wedding. Northeast 19 isn't so far." "How did you know we were getting married there?" Melia rolled her eyes. "Gossip is the blood of the Excalibur." Whitby groped around for an unclaimed cup and handed it to North. She tapped the rim of her cup against his, then screwed it to the table without even pretending to drink. "So everyone knows everything about everyone," she said. Melia and Whitby shrugged in unison. In every group of people there is a hierarchy, and the circus was no exception. The acrobats were right in the centre. Half the time they were allowed to tell others what to do, and the other half they had to do as others told them. Red Gold was at the top of the pile, lord of their tiny kingdom. Avalon was his lady, and then came Ensel, at least officially, although everyone disobeyed Avalon behind her back and Ensel right to his face. He never complained to his father. Melia said that it was because he didn't want to look bad in front of Red Gold, but North thought he was too self-absorbed to care what anyone else did. Next came North. She wished this was because of her bear, but knew it was due to her betrothal to Ensel. And then the fire breather and the acrobats. Barrow was above Melia and Whitby because as the cook he also caught fish for their meals. The three glamours were at the bottom of the pile, but they had the sort of haughty beauty that meant they had to care for little else. And then the three clowns, who were their own separate fiefdom. They didn't follow anyone else's rules, but didn't expect others to follow theirs either. They were given some leeway for being the skin divers, tasked with collecting seaweed to supplement their meals. If the water was shallow and unpopulated enough, sometimes they could also find tiny caches of coral or mother of pearl to trade for better food. North was a little scared of the clowns, though she'd never admit it. The clowns loved the military acts and would have done them on every island given the chance. In choosing their performances each night, in denying them what they most wanted, Red Gold had saved them 100 times. Melia and Whitby were the best company on the Excalibur, and North wanted to talk with them, drink with them, pretend that things were normal. North. Whitby leaned forward and tapped her on the nose as he'd seen her do with her bear. Drink up. No time to mess about. There's a storm coming soon, you know. "And we should all get as pissed as stoats in preparation," said Melia. "Well, it's sure as ties that we don't want to be sober." North lifted her cup and let a drop of the liquid onto her tongue, enjoying the burn as it went down her throat. Such a tiny amount wouldn't matter, and if she didn't drink it, then she'd have to explain herself to the acrobats. Instead of a dizzy joy, the alcohol only made her feel sick. She had to tell someone. She couldn't deal with this alone. That night on the shore and the secret growing inside her. She'd tell them everything. She practiced the words in her head. "Melia, Whitby, I have to tell you something. It might not make sense, but listen." But she could see that they were in no mood to hear confession. Whitby had reached over the table and was trying to tickle Melia, so she'd shoved handfuls of her hair into his face as a distraction. He backed away from the onslaught, raising his hands in surrender. "Mercy, mercy! I'd rather choke on my drink than on your hair." Well, I'd rather you choked on my hair than said another word about that storm. Melia, seeing that her cup was empty, took a gulp from North's. It's not like we've never got through a storm before. It's been ahead of us for days, Melia. See how it taunts us? We may need the good grace of the sea, but she couldn't care less what we do, or whether we're alive when we do it. Melia shrugged. Serves us right for being daft enough to sail into it. We could stay here. Stay? Whitby snorted. I'm sure the clams would love that. Staying still is not for us, my love. We're sharks. We move forward or we die. North climbed into her coracle long before dawn. The party was still going, but all she wanted was the comfort of her bear's heart beating against her back. She crawled in beside him, still in her day clothes. How silly to think that she could have confessed to the acrobats. They were her friends, but they weren't her family. The clowns on the Excalibur were the children of clowns on the Excalibur, and their children would be clowns on the Excalibur in turn, assuming they lived long enough to make children. But not Melia and Whitby. They bought their way onto the Excalibur, adopted it as their newest home. Who knew how many families they'd had before this one? North was born on the Excalibur's deck, and she'd never known another life. The acrobats wouldn't understand. There was only one creature alive that loved North unconditionally. She lived in a family of 2, soon to be 3. It would be fine. Her bear was safe. He loved her, and he would learn to love her baby too. She let the coracle rock her to sleep, with her bear's heartbeat at her back, and the laughter from the mess boat sounding an echo. Chapter 4. Cash. The clowns were hungry. Every day the feeling grew. All damplings hungered, but Cash, Dosh and Doe wanted more than food. Stuck under the swollen thumb of Red Gold, which was really the icy thumb of his horse-bitch wife, the clowns could not fulfill their true purpose. Clowns are mind readers, megaphones, shouting out the things that the clams think but don't dare say. There's power in saying what no one else will. They wanted to scream and rage and have the whole world listen. They wanted sex and death and power. They were silenced, and it was starving them. Cash broke away from working on Dosh's face and snorted. What? Mumbled Dosh, keeping still to avoid smudging the white paint. Red Gold lets us do the military act one night and not the next, said Cash. Where's the logic in that? Why does he get to choose when we're free and when we're chained? He should let us decide. We know better than anyone that the clams love it. They love to hate it, claimed in Doe, succinct as ever. Even better. Who wants to be loved? Hate is a much stronger emotion. Finish my face, mumbled Dosh, lips pursed so the makeup wouldn't crease. Cash was getting frustrated. It was always hard to get more than a sentence out of Doe, but Dosh could usually be counted on to join in. Not tonight, it seemed. There are more important things here than our painted faces. There's no point if we can't use them to speak. Is this really enough for you? Cash motioned around their coracle. It was sparse and scrubbed, the walls painted matte black, everything packed neatly in chests made of lashed-together seal bone. Is this all you want our lives to be? Parading our muted voices, flashing our fly-by-night skin, nothing but flesh for clams? We have things to say. We need to say them. Dosh shrugged. This is how it is. And now you made me move my face so you can fix it. But it doesn't have to be like this. It could be different. Cash knew that this night would be like every other. The clowns would draw on masks, wrap their limbs in costumes, tuck and pad their torsos strategically so that the audience got their gleeful little gender fuck. Then they'd pretty up their coracle for the after show, make it all mysterious for the clam girls. Layers of coloured fabric, strange bones, abandoned objects they'd found while skin diving. When landlockers bunked up with a circus performer, they expected something special. They had all the slow-witted farm boys they wanted on their grubby home islands. Now they wanted exotic animals in unlocked cages. They wanted to blink glitter for at least a week after. They wanted a secret to keep from their future husbands. "You don't want a clam girl to warm your bunk tonight?" mumbled Dosh. "Yes, I do. No, I don't not want that. I want..." For years, another body in the bunk had been enough to distract Cash. But not now. "While you're deciding what you want, let me tell you what I want. For you to shut up and finish my damn face." Cash smudged 2 black eyes into the white. "Doe, help me out. Our fellow clown has no ambition beyond what's between our legs. But you, I know you see the bigger picture here." Doe, sprawled across 2 bunks, glanced up. "Well, clowns?" They looked up. The coracle's canvas top was peeled back at one corner, and who should be peering in but Avalon, the horse bitch. They all turned their backs to her and returned to their business. "Clowns, I am speaking to you." Mumbled Cash, resuming work on Dosh's makeup. Cash knew that Avalon wouldn't dare climb down into their coracle. Her pregnancy dictated everything she did, everything the whole damn circus did, it sometimes seemed, and she wouldn't risk a tumble down the rope ladder. Instead, she'd be squatting on the canvas, trying to look regal in case any clams lifted their eyes from the shore to peer at the circus freaks. From above Cash, there was a rustle as Avalon pulled the canvas back further. "Did you not hear me, clowns? I am ordering you to listen." Doe and Dosh managed to stifle their snorts of laughter, but Cash was not so quick. "Are you mocking me, clowns?" "No, mistress," chanted Dosh, painted lips barely moving. "Never, mistress." Avalon took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength to deal with the simply awful clowns and their simply awful manners. "I am here to ensure that you are not getting ready for the military show," she said. "You should be preparing for the banker show, as you agreed." "Don't you trust us, mistress?" simpered Cash. "Don't you think we mean what we say?" "Not for a moment." "Well, mistress, that's rather rude." Cash paused to let the other clowns chime in, but they stayed silent. If he was the only one brave enough to openly defy the horse bitch, then so be it. But Avalon was not finished. "This is my circus, just as much as it is my husband's," she said, "and the crew must obey me as they obey him." If that were true, thought Cash, you wouldn't need to say it. Instead of responding, the clowns got back to work. Avalon wouldn't climb into the coracle, but she did drop her head in to stare at each of the clowns in turn. Her voice became a hiss. "Just do as you're told. Soon you won't be my problem anymore. North and Ensel can have you, and good riddance." "Is that so?" murmured Cash, cheeks stretching with a grin. Dosh and Doe pursed their lips at one another. "It is so. My husband is buying a house for us, and then I will be free of this stinking, tarnished circus forever, which I can tell you will be the finest day of my life. I'll be a landlocker, and the rest of you can burn. I'll even watch from my house." "I heard that house was meant for..." burst out Dosh. But Cash's hand on Dosh's wrist stopped the words. "Meant for what?" said Avalon, eyes narrowed. "Meant for nothing, mistress." "Meant for you, mistress." Cash made an elaborate bow, forehead to feet. For 3 long breaths, Avalon hung above the coracle. The clowns kept their faces straight as knife blades. Avalon opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to think better of it. She threw the canvas over with an angry flourish. The coracle swayed as she stepped off it back to the Excalibur. In the dim light, the clowns huddled together, foreheads pressed, faces split with glee. She thinks that house is for, but it's not for her, it's the North. But Red Gold hasn't told Avalon. And when she finds out, she'll hate North even more than she hates the rest of us as much as she does North. But when she finds out, yes, when she finds out, there'll be... The clowns grinned at one another. Chaos, said Cash. The clowns were hungry. They did not want to wait to be fed. But when they sated their hunger, they wanted it to be in the right way, for the right reasons. They could wait. After that night's performance, the crew of the Excalibur felt the storm finally stir into life. They furled their big top, soothed their animals, weighed anchor, all under a sky bruised dark with clouds. As the sun set, it lit the clouds from below, making them round and bright as fruit. They drank up, slept it off, and moved forwards onto the next island. What choice did they have? Landlockers are not sympathetic to the problems of the sea, and circus folk would rather take their chances with the petulant waves. With glitter in their blood, coals in their chests, choking on their secrets, they sailed into the night. Soon they lost sight of land. The first drops of rain fell. Chapter 5. Callanish. For days the sea had been fractious. Waves chuttered and schwacked against the moorings of Callanish's house, making it difficult for her to think straight. She ate her meals, performed the restings, tipped dead birds into the water. Every night she drank her cup of milk on the porch, watching the distant silhouettes of passing boats. At mealtimes she wound up the gramophone and listened to records as she ate, the music rolling and wavering. It felt almost like a conversation. But Odell was right. Sometimes you did need to say things and have someone respond. Silence was not her only concern. The supply boat was late and her cupboards were almost empty. No graces meant no restings, and no restings meant no food. If it didn't come before the storm, well, no point thinking about it. Wishing for a boat did not make it arrive. Several times as the day slipped towards night with no sign of the supply boat, Callanish took her rowing boat out among the grace cages. She pulled off her gloves and let her fingertips hover over the surface of the water. The webbing stretched. She knew there was seaweed down there and fish, but there were also bodies, and both the seaweed and the fish grew from the bodies. She pulled her gloves back on and rowed back to the house. Still, each time she rowed out, she let her fingers dip closer to the sea. There would be no harm in touching it. There would be no harm in slipping off her boat and into the water. And what would be the harm, really, if she stayed down there? When Callanish was a child, her mother told her that the trees were to be worshipped because they had been there before everyone who'd ever lived on Earth had been born, and they would still be there after everyone who'd ever lived on Earth was dead. But Callanish knew that the sea had been there even longer. One evening, as her fingers dipped towards the surface, she saw the supply boat approaching. She pulled on her gloves and rowed back to her house. Now she would not need seaweed or fish or the swallow of the sea over her head. She tried to be glad. She felt scooped out, hollow as a shell. She accepted the delivery without speaking. Her silence did not seem to matter, as the delivery man kept up a steady stream of words without leaving any gaps for a response as he hauled cages of graces from the boat to the dock to the porch to the kitchen table. He spoke of trading routes and wheat shortages, of an abandoned ship found floating, perhaps empty for years, crewed only by cats, of a baby born with gills and webbed hands, a half-fish monster buried alive at the World Tree by its landlocker mother, and good riddance to the beast, of a new trend for tattooing the bases of one's fingernails purple, of a boy who had his hand cut off for chopping down a tree, of whispered scandals amongst military officers. Over the years, Callanish had heard all these stories with small variations. Everything changed and nothing changed. His chatter felt like having a record playing quietly, a soothing background hum. She sat at the table, her gloved hands pressed tight between her knees so he couldn't possibly see. She had received thousands of graces, delivered by dozens of different supply boats, and none had yet seen her hands. The government decreed that she should receive just as many graces as she needed to stay alive. But the exchange of restings for food was not the only thing keeping her alive. Wearing her gloves and slippers was just as important as eating. Given the choice, she would rather not be buried, still breathing, under the World Tree. Finally, the supply boat was empty and Callanish's table was full. "Farewell," said Callanish, just as she always did. The delivery man may have wished her farewell back, but it was getting hard to pick out individual words from his avalanche of sound. She was sure that he was still talking, even as he sailed away. The days passed. Callanish rested bodies, took her payment, filled her aching belly. One morning, she rose to a storm approaching from the north. The sky dark, the water choppy and licking up over the edges of the porch. The anxious trilling from the grace cages made her want to cover her ears. She took her rowing boat out between the lines of graces, pulling open the cages as she passed. Most of them were too weak to fly. Those that could get out of their cages might make it some way before falling into the sea to drown. Those that could not fly would stay in their cages and drown. If she took them into the house, they would die because she had no food for them. Whatever she did, she could not save them. She wasn't supposed to free the birds, but who would know? Who would care? A small crime, another secret that could only hurt the one who kept it. When all the cages were open, she lashed her boat flat to the dock. Of the newly delivered graces, not yet used for restings, only 2 remained, caged in the corner of her house. She didn't have enough to feed them, and no one would approach with food for days after the storm. She opened the cages and flung open her front door, thinking that the graces would spread their wings and fill her house with a flurry on their swift path outside. Instead, the pair took their time, pecking around the floor, shivering their feathers, regarding Callanish with their tiny black dots of eyes. Finally, they made it to the door and opened their wings to the wind. They were stronger than the resting graces and soon disappeared. When all the graces had flown, she closed the metal shutters over the windows, then stood for a moment on the porch. It was almost beautiful. The water chopping up in white waves like petticoat lace, the delicate arches of the empty grace cages, the clouds piled up in layers from charcoal to bruised blue to black. She wished that she could dive down into the water, that she could live down there under the water, that she could drink water and breathe water, let water support her limbs and lay a comforting weight on her shoulders. Down there she'd be safe from the storm. On the surface, the waves and the wind could tear the world to tatters, but she'd be safe down in her watery cocoon. She went into the house and bolted the door. She waited. Chapter 6. Melia. Melia had not feared a storm since the day she'd met Whitby. All damplings have their own relationship with the sea, and Whitby's attitude was one of respect and acceptance, tempered with a generous helping of lust. "The sea does not need us," he would announce to Melia in the warmth of their bunk, bodies tucked together like spoons. That fickle mistress, it's all the same to her whether we live to be 100 or drown before we even take a breath. We're parasites. Eating her offspring, drinking her salty blood, cutting through the waves of her belly. We're living off her spoils. No wonder she wants to devour us all. So we should give up and jump overboard? Melia would tease back, clasping her hands with his, stretching their arms together until the joints cracked. Let the sea have us? You're assuming it's our decision to make, my love. She'll only take us when she wants us. I, for one, look forward to the embrace of the sea when she decides that it's time. At this, he would wrap his arms around Melia, biting kisses along her shoulder. Just think of her rhythm, her passion, her relentless, depthless wetness. Oh, sweet relief for this unworthy man. At this, Melia would clamp her hand over Whitby's mouth, but could never resist turning her body in his grasp, replacing her hand with her mouth. Then they would make love, pressed close in the narrow space of their coracle, moving together with the rhythm of the waves. Their bodies wound up speckled like eggs, white on tan from the touches of one another's chalky palms. Melia took care to kiss every one of Whitby's scars, built up over their years of performances at dozens of different circuses. Other damplings were born and worked and died as part of the same crew, treading the same deck, hoisting the same sails their whole lives. But Melia did not need such ties. Whitby was the only home she needed. With their skills, it was not so hard to buy their way onto a new ship. Melia could not remember whose idea it was to sow misinformation about their relationship when they joined the Circus Excalibur. They were not siblings and they were not married, and Whitby found it endlessly amusing that anyone could believe either. They were simply lovers, though there was nothing simple about that. They were aerialists, the two of them. Many ways to fly, but only one way to fall. Afterwards, sweat damp and tingling, Whitby would bury his face in her shoulder and whisper, "We are the sea." They had not had such an exchange last night after their drinking session in the mess boat. By the time they made it back to their coracle, they were so booze-slurred and woozy that they could barely manage to tie their canvas shut and strap themselves into their bunk before their eyes closed. In the abyss between waking and sleeping, Melia thought of her own relationship with the sea. She did not lust for the sea the way that Whitby did, but when he said to her, "We are the sea," that made the most perfect kind of sense. She was the sea, and so was everyone else. We all come from the sea. Melia had heard that in the olden days, when the world had lots of land spreading out over miles and miles in every direction, seas and lakes were called bodies of water. That made sense too. Her body was water, and Whitby's body was water, and Red Golds, and Ensels, and Norths, and even the Bears. They were the sea, and so they could trust the sea. She wanted to tell Whitby this, but her tongue was too heavy to make the words. Sleep took over her thoughts, and she slipped away. Melia woke in blackness to the boom of Red Gold's voice projecting across the coracles. Over his voice there was an odd whistling, a screeching, and Melia's half-sleeping mind could not understand it. "Tighten the chains!" came Red Gold's shout, and there was a clanking of the chains that tied together the line of coracles. "Haul in the sail!" And there was a whoosh and thwack of canvas. "Lash your overhead!" And this call was almost lost in the wind, but still the phrase worked on Melia like an alarm, jolting her awake, her fingers scrabbling at the buckle of her bunk strap. It was the wind, the screech and the whistle of the wind and the rain, and as she swung upright, she felt how the boat was rocking and dipping in the rough waves. In the dim light, she could make out the shape of Whitby reaching for the canvas overhead, his knees bending and ankles rolling as he moved with the deep sway of the coracle. She staggered over to him. Her narrow legs felt as flimsy as seaweed, but she knew her arms were strong enough to fight even the roughest swell. Rain blew through the gap. The canvas had come unfastened and was flapping in the wind like a panicked bird. Melia was instantly soaked and fought to keep her feet steady on the slick inside of the coracle. Can you hear that cat? Jesus. Working together in the darkness, they yanked the canvas tight and knotted it shut. There would be no point in lighting a seal-fat lamp. The sea was wild enough to knock it from its hook, and if the canvas caught fire, then there would be nothing to protect them from the rain. When the canvas was secure, Melia went port and Whitby went starboard, running their hands over the shelves lining the coracle's curved sides. Straps and buckles and strips of canvas kept everything flat. It was impossible to see in the darkness, but they knew the shape of their belongings well enough and could feel that nothing was missing. Melia tightened the buckles so that things could not knock together and break. Rainwater sloshed around on the deck of the coracle, but there was nothing to be done about that now. They could drain it all in the morning when the sun came up. She kept sidestepping round until she bumped into Whitby at the end of his half-circuit. Done. Overhead tight, belongings secured, they were safe. They lay back down on their bunk, frozen and sodden from the rain. "Thanks," whispered Melia to Whitby. "For what?" "For keeping us safe." "You're always safe with me, my lass. Besides, I knew I had to patch that gap up quick smart. I wouldn't want that salt water to get in here and cause damage, now would I? Just think about your hair." "You mean your hair?" said Melia. "Of course I do," said Whitby. "I have to stay beautiful for my women." Melia sat up, pulling away from him in mock offence. "Women plural, is it?" But she could not keep the laughter out of her voice, could not even pretend to be annoyed at Whitby. "You and the sea." He pulled her back down into his arms. "You're better company than she is, but me and that briny temptress, we're like this." Whitby crossed his index finger over Melia's so they were intertwined. As if in answer, the sea sighed and boomed against the hull. Melia felt the safe, gentle scrape of coracles on either side and knew that they were all safe now. The coracles seemed to be tiny, fragile things, but they had been through many storms, bobbing up amongst the roughest waves, weathering the wind and salt spray like miniature fortresses. The sea had never tried to claim one of them. Perhaps she did not bother with such small prey. Melia turned to face Whitby, pressing herself into his body to lessen her shivers, and listened to the waves and the wind shriek and boom against the hull. In the centre of a storm, it was easy to believe the old superstitions. The gods of the deep, hungry for revenge. The earth as a flat plain, with the seas tipping over the edge into nothing. Here be dragons. Melia smiled and rested her damp face against Whitby's shoulder, letting his heat dry the rain from her forehead. Colours and shapes began to flicker behind her eyelids as she drifted into sleep. She'd weathered worse storms, and lying awake all night would only make her tired, less able to carry out any repairs in the morning. She let herself drift. A wave boomed against the next coracle, North's coracle, and wouldn't her poor bear be frightened by all this noise? And Melia pictured its motion behind her closed eyelids. Cresting the wave, tugging on the taut chain, righting itself on the swell. Safe, like always. Even as it thudded into the side of their coracle hard enough to knock her teeth together, she knew it was safe. Under the sea's tantrum, she heard another sound. Slosh-suck, slosh-suck. The rhythm of the waves, but closer and clearer. She opened her eyes to check that the canvas was still tight. The boat tipped on the waves, and Melia saw a small circle of stars. It tipped back, and the stars were gone, replaced by blackness and the slosh of water. Amelia understood what had happened before the words could form in her mind. A crack. There was a crack in the hull. Their coracle was sinking. Whitby! Amelia's fingers scrabbled at the buckles of the bunk strap. The hull! Amelia crossed the coracle on her knees so she wouldn't fall, the thin layer of water numbing her legs. She lit a lamp and held it high. Whitby was out of bed, reaching for scraps of oilcloth, reaching for the tin of tar, his movements calm and precise. She held the lamp closer to the hull. The crack was the size of an egg, and she breathed a sigh of relief. Whitby could patch that. But the oilcloth was too small. The lid was stuck on the tin of tar, and with each swell and push of the waves, the crack widened. Whitby held the scrap of oilcloth to the weeping hull, but now it was not big enough to reach the edges. Amelia grabbed another. Lid, tar, fingers, oilcloth. It was not enough. It would not stick. They were still on their knees, the water now halfway up their thighs, salt stinking and dark. Amelia felt sure that the coracle was sitting lower in the water. Panic blurred her thoughts. Her legs were numb. The light from the seal-fat lamp jerked against the sides of the coracle. Her hands were shaking, and knowing that they shook was not enough to make them stop. "Hush now," murmured Whitby over the shriek of the wind and rain, and she realised that she'd been making a sound of distress, a low moan in the back of her throat, the same pitch and beat as the waves. Whitby turned away from the hull, eyes casting about the coracle, looking for something that was big enough to patch the gap. Amelia wanted to help him, but she could not tear her gaze away. As she watched, the crack spread wide as a yawning mouth, revealing a tumble of stars and the sea's white teeth. The coracle tipped into the swell of a wave. Water poured through the gap, knocking Amelia and Whitby onto their backs in the freezing water. "We can't," said Amelia. "It's too big. We need to get out." Whitby did not reply. Amelia was not sure he could bring himself to say the words. He tugged down 2 loops of the long rope they used for their show and knotted them around their waists. Amelia reached for the float strapped to the wall, then realised it was a waste of time. They wouldn't make a difference in a sea this raw. Their coracle was only the third away from the main boat, and their ropes were long enough to reach across North's and Ainsl's coracles, assuming that North had not also been damaged in the collision. Red Gold would be on the deck of the Excalibur, but the stars might not be bright enough to let him see the coracle's damage beneath the dark water and white froth. Amelia threaded the lamp onto its hook, and burning canvas was now the least of their worries, and began untying the overhead. The knots were tight and her fingers were numb. "Whitby!" she shouted. "I can't! It's too—" And he was beside her, nimble fingers dissolving the knots, strong arms pulling back the canvas, calloused hands throwing the end of her rope out of the coracle and into the night. It thudded and splashed into the sea. Amelia pulled herself up onto the edge of the coracle, wrapping the overhead ropes around one arm so she wouldn't tip into the water. The coracle's edge was slippery with seawater, and she overbalanced, jerking the coracle as she landed on her knees. The thud judded through her bones. She didn't think that she had landed that hard, but still the impact seemed to vibrate through the coracle. In the bleaching starlight, she saw the outline of Red Gold lashed to the Excalibur's mainmast. She waved her free arm at him, but he did not notice. Now that Amelia was out, she could see how low their coracle sat in the water, how it was already beginning to drag down its neighbours. A split of lightning arced across the sky, echoed by a deep grumble of thunder. It lit up the world, painting Red Gold's wide red face as white as bone. Amelia's head spun. It was all unreal. Pale shapes, etchings on burnt wood, the ends of stories. Red Gold raised an arm to tail her, and she threw him the rope. He could not know what had happened to the coracle, but he knew that they were in trouble. She made sure that Red Gold had a tight hold of her rope, then reached down for Whitby's to throw that too. She could not find it. "Whitby!" she shouted, but the wind stole his name. She kicked her feet in the empty space of the coracle, trying to find him. "Whitby, stop trying to fix it! It's too late!" She ducked her head inside, but couldn't see anything. She pulled up some slack on her rope and dropped down into the coracle. All her breath was knocked out as she landed hip deep in the icy water. "Whitby, damn you to earth!" She groped around in the dark, but could only find the signs of the coracle, her numb fingers bumping and scraping against the straps and buckles. Nothing. Nothing. Then a tug around her belly, pulling her backwards through the water. She pressed her hands against the walls and screamed out Whitby's name. But Red Gold had the end of her rope and was pulling her out. As she came free of the water, she kicked her legs out as hard and wide as she could. They caught things, dozens of things, soft things and shattering things, but she did not know if any of those things were Whitby. Around her waist the rope tugged, and it was so tight that she could not breathe, could not call again for Whitby. Stars wheeled above her. The sea raged in long, deep heaves. She tried to turn, to untie the rope, to signal to Red Gold. As she slid over the edge of the coracle, it scraped a long graze of skin from her forearm. A wave spat salt water onto the wound, but she felt nothing. She half scrambled, half dragged over the two coracles and onto the sodden deck of the Excalibur. Red Gold pushed her towards the cabin. Through the burn of salt water in her eyes, she saw that he was climbing across the coracles to save Whitby. Despite his tight and mismatched oilskins, his cracked and bloody cheeks, Red Gold at that moment was the most glorious thing that Melia had ever seen. She held tight to the mast, watching him. Red Gold ducked his head into the coracle, emerging with the end of the rope in his hand. He steadied himself on the half-tied canvas and hauled on the rope. Then he hesitated. Melia squinted through the salt spray. It seemed that he had seen what was on the end of the rope and dropped it back into the sinking coracle. But that could not be. Now the clowns and the glamours were emerging from their boats, ropes around their waists, faces sheened with rain. Together with Red Gold, they grasped the chain attaching her coracle to the glamour's boat. Now they were unhooking the glamour's boat and hooking it onto North's. Now they were standing on North's coracle, ready to unhook Melia's entirely. No. No. Why did Red Gold not pull Whitby out? She remembered the thud as she'd fallen, the judder through the coracle, the crack of bone she'd thought had been her own. "No!" she shouted, though she knew Red Gold could not hear her. She launched herself off the Excalibur and onto Ensel's coracle, not caring about its unsteady lollop, about the rain throbbing at her shoulders, about the thunder vibrating her insides. She grabbed Red Gold's arm. "No!" she shouted into his ear. He did not reply, did not shake his head, but his intentions were clear. If they did not let the coracle go, it would drag them all down. But why would Melia care? If Whitby was in the sea, then they might as well all be in the sea. She reached into the coracle. The water level was high, almost to the top. The end of the rope floated. She grabbed it, closed her eyes against the salt spray and pulled. She could lose the coracle, but she couldn't lose Whitby. Hand over hand, eyes shut tight, she pulled. She reached the end of the rope, the start of something heavy. She kept her eyes closed. She felt Red Gold unfasten the chain and let the coracle sink. Still, she held the rope.
I thought you said it was all going to be okay.
Oh, how could you do this?
No!
I'm glad you didn't stop a few pages before.
Really help.
I'm really sorry. Are you all okay? Is Mike okay? Mike Cox, are you okay?
Doing okay, thank you.
Is everyone else okay? Oh no, I'm so sorry.
That was very tense.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
beautifully executed, which is why we all feel horrible.
Bears, everybody. Everybody grab your buddy. Oh,
Been here all along.
Is there an echo?
Andrada.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, sweetie. My heart is like beating quite fast for that.
We've got some food ideas though. Stolen plums.
Stolen plums and hard liquor.
You have to screw onto the deck.
Oh, Gordon, your face was like just below on my screen, and it was an absolute treat, the whole of that last section. Gordon, for anyone who wasn't watching, had like his whole shirt pulled up over his face.
Oh.
Well, I almost forgot to breathe.
It was so tense I couldn't move. It was just like crawling on deeper and deeper into the cushions. And
So I could be wrong, but I've been thinking about since last night, like what exactly the coracles are, because previously I'd thought of them as literally like literally big baskets or something, but obviously they're like lashed over. They might just be like skip bins or something, like just bobbing around in a fucking storm, which like, oh, Jesus, no wonder they fucking sank.
Yeah. Rough. Properly rough.
Yeah.
I did Google what coracles were during that chapter.
I mean, coracles are just like baskets. They're like big round boat. Well, they're not big, small round boats. But like these things don't seem like any pictures of any coracle I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Usually carry.
Like the fact that they're metal sounds to me like they're just like literally just repurposed shipping containers or something.
Ah, yeah.
Giant wok.
I was imagining them as like little capsules attached to the big boat.
Yeah, I think I was as well. Gordon, do you have any notes for us, my love?
I do, of course. I mean, most of my notes are, ah! But I do have notes and questions for the audience.
Oh, excellent. Do we no? So we should stop the recording, should we? Before your notes.
I mean, I think we should give some hugs to the catch-up crew in case they're still feeling it.
I think that is a good idea.
Sorry, catch-up crew.
Catch-up crew. I really am sorry. Okay. Good night. Good night, catch-up crew. We love you.